The Great Depression was more than just an economic crisis. It was a profound test of survival, endurance, and ingenuity for American families. With unemployment at record highs and money scarce, families across the country faced daily uncertainty about whether they would have enough food to feed their children, let alone provide meals that felt satisfying. Supermarkets as we know them today were still a luxury in many towns, and processed convenience foods were rare. The family table became a place of both hardship and innovation, where necessity drove creativity in ways that would shape household cooking for generations. Families had to rethink what constituted a meal. Every scrap of food was valuable, and wasting ingredients was considered unthinkable. Recipes were adapted, substitutes were invented, and ordinary pantry staples were transformed into dishes that could nourish a family, stretch meager budgets, and even provide a sense of comfort during one of the most difficult periods in American history. Many of these meals are now forgotten, but they tell a story of resilience, ingenuity, and the power of culinary creativity under constraint. In this video, we're going to explore 20 Depression-era foods that vanished from family tables. These are dishes that were once everyday staples, but now exist mostly in old cookbooks, historical records, and the memories of those who lived through the era. From creative desserts to hearty casseroles and inventive vegetables, these foods show us how necessity turned ordinary ingredients into survival strategies and, sometimes, surprisingly enjoyable meals. Before we dive into these forgotten Depression-era foods, I need you to do something. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're uncovering stories and recipes that shape generations, and you don't want to miss a single one. Share this video with anyone who loves history, nostalgia, or cooking. It's a trip down memory lane that everyone can enjoy. Comment below if you've ever tried one of these dishes, or if your family has a recipe that survived from those tough times. Your engagement helps us keep these stories alive and ensures that these incredible culinary innovations don't vanish from memory. So stick around, because what you're about to see will make you rethink every meal your grandparents ever served. Hoover stew. Named after President Herbert Hoover, who was often blamed for the Depression, this stew was the ultimate catch-all meal. It usually combined macaroni or pasta, canned tomatoes, beans, and whatever scraps of meat or vegetables were lying around. Sometimes hot dogs were added for protein, making it a favorite at soup kitchens. Families loved it because it stretched ingredients far beyond what a single meal normally would. A single pot could feed a family of 6, and leftovers could be reheated multiple times. The simplicity also meant even children or inexperienced cooks could throw it together. Today, Hoover stew serves as a symbol of resilience, even though it rarely appears on modern tables. It represented more than just food, it was a community dish, often ladled out in church basements, relief centers, and neighborly kitchens. For many, it wasn't just sustenance but also a reminder that people survived by sharing. Cornmeal mush. Cornmeal was cheap, filling, and versatile. Families boiled it in water or milk to make a porridge called cornmeal mush. It could be eaten hot for breakfast, cooled and sliced for frying at lunch, or used as a base for puddings at dinner. What made it important was its adaptability. It could be sweetened with sugar or syrup for children, or salted and spiced for adults. In a time when food had to work double duty, cornmeal mush provided both comfort and sustenance. For many families, especially in rural areas, cornmeal was purchased in bulk and stored in barrels, making it a reliable staple when other foods ran short. It was also deeply tied to tradition, as Native Americans and early settlers had been eating variations of mush long before the Depression. Its enduring legacy is that it taught households how to create variety from repetition, making one humble ingredient feel like 3 different meals. Prune pudding. President Franklin D. Roosevelt was said to have been served prune pudding at the White House as a show of solidarity with struggling Americans. Prunes were cheap, easy to store, and provided essential vitamins and fiber. Families stewed them into a pudding or custard that could be stretched across multiple meals. While prune pudding isn't exactly a dessert you'd find in modern bakeries, it was a Depression staple that turned a humble fruit into something that felt special. It was especially common in schools and institutional kitchens, where bulk ingredients needed to go a long way. Children often wrinkled their noses at the dish, but mothers prized it because it was inexpensive and nourishing. Interestingly, many older Americans still associate prunes with comfort because of this era. Though it's faded from mainstream culture, prune pudding stands as an example of turning limitation into tradition, proving that even overlooked fruits can become the centerpiece of survival. Potato and onion pudding. This savory dish combined mashed potatoes with sautéed onions, often baked into a casserole-like pudding. With meat scarce, potatoes became a lifeline, and onions added just enough flavor to make the dish hearty and satisfying. Families often threw in breadcrumbs, leftover bits of meat, or herbs from their gardens. It was cheap, filling, and easy to prepare in bulk. Beyond just food, it taught children patience and creativity in the kitchen, showing how even the humblest ingredients could create something memorable. For immigrant families from Ireland or Eastern Europe, this dish felt familiar, echoing recipes from the old world. It also had the advantage of being versatile, served as a side dish at supper or reheated as breakfast the next morning. Many remembered it fondly not because it was luxurious, but because it carried the warmth of home, where love was stretched just as far as the food on the table. Vinegar pie. When fruit and sugar were scarce, vinegar pie became a clever substitute. The vinegar provided the tang that fruit normally would, creating a custard-like dessert with a surprising depth of flavor. It may sound unappetizing today, but for Depression-era families, vinegar pie was a rare treat that gave them the illusion of luxury when luxuries were impossible. A typical recipe used flour, sugar, butter, when available, and vinegar to form a filling that mimicked lemon custard pie. Mothers served it on Sundays or holidays to lift spirits, reminding families that even in the hardest times, dessert had a place on the table. In fact, vinegar pie has seen a quiet revival in some southern kitchens, where it's celebrated as a piece of culinary history. It reflects the ingenuity of home cooks who refuse to give up tradition, showing how flavor can be coaxed from the simplest pantry staples. Mock turtle soup. Turtle soup had once been a delicacy, but during the Depression, turtle meat was unaffordable. Instead, families made mock turtle soup with inexpensive cuts of beef, veal, or organ meats like calf's head, simmered with vegetables and spices to mimic the flavor of real turtle. It was a dish that made families feel like they were dining on something special, even if it was built from scraps. In working-class homes, it was served on Sundays, giving the illusion of eating like the wealthy. In fact, the recipe dated back centuries in Europe, where mock versions had long existed. Depression families carried it forward, making do with what they could afford. Though it may sound unusual now, mock turtle soup reflects the human need for ritual, recreating luxury even in poverty. For many, it was proof that hardship couldn't completely erase tradition or dignity at the dinner table. Dandelion greens. Salad foraging became a necessity, and one of the easiest plants to find was the humble dandelion. Families would gather dandelion greens from fields and yards, boil or sauté them, and eat them as salad or side dishes. Rich in vitamins, dandelions were free and nourishing, even if children often complained about the bitter taste. Today, dandelion greens are sold as a trendy superfood, but back then, they were a symbol of survival. Parents often encouraged children to help forage, teaching them the value of nature's hidden resources. Some families even used the flowers for wine or syrup, wasting nothing. The act of eating weeds might have felt humiliating for some, but in retrospect, it showed the resilience of people who could see food where others saw only pests. That very bitterness that children disliked was ironically packed with nutrition their growing bodies desperately needed. Olive loaf sandwiches. Imagine yourself back in the mid-20th century when American lunchboxes featured a new staple, the olive loaf sandwich. This cold cut, blending ground pork, beef, and green olives, quickly became popular for its distinctive flavor. Assembling the sandwich was easy. Layer slices of olive loaf with creamy mayonnaise or tangy mustard, crisp lettuce, and sometimes cheese, all nestled between fresh bread. This simple yet delicious sandwich became a picnic and lunchbox favorite, often enjoyed with potato chips or pickles. It tells the story of how processed meats and cold cuts shaped American lunch culture, offering quick, flavorful, and varied meal options. Over time, the rise of fresh, health-conscious eating habits led to the decline of processed meats. However, the olive loaf sandwich remains a nostalgic reminder of simpler culinary times. Sloppy Joe. Another notable sandwich from that era is the Sloppy Joe, which consists of ground beef, onions, tomato sauce or ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, and other seasonings served on a hamburger bun. The origins of the Sloppy Joe are debated, with some attributing it to a bar owner in Havana, Cuba in 1917, while others trace it back to Sioux City, Iowa in the 1930s. By the 1940s, references to Sloppy Joes as sandwiches became common in the United States. These sandwiches reflect the culinary trends of their times, offering a glimpse into the flavors and preferences that shaped mid-20th century American cuisine. Ravioli sandwiches are an unconventional, playful lunch option that taps into the beloved flavors of Italian cuisine while embracing the convenience of a sandwich. These emerged likely in response to the popularity of canned ravioli introduced by Chef Boyardee in the 1930s. The sandwich involves placing canned ravioli filled with meat or cheese between slices of bread, which can be toasted or grilled to meld the flavors and add a textural contrast to the soft ravioli filling. Known in some places as Italian sloppy joes or ravioli hero, these sandwiches gained a following among budget-conscious college students and anyone appreciating the melding of comforting Italian flavors with the easy handheld format of a sandwich. Creamed corn sandwich. The creamed corn sandwich is a nostalgic reminder of comfort food from simpler times. This sandwich features creamed corn spread on buttered bread. The creamy sweet corn provides a comforting taste, making it a popular choice during times when ingredients were limited. Spread the creamed corn generously on slices of bread to create a hearty and flavorful sandwich. This dish reflects an era when homemade simplicity was highly valued. The creamed corn sandwich continues to be a comforting option for those who enjoy the flavors of classic American comfort food, offering a taste of a bygone era. Potato pancakes potatoes were a Depression-era hero, cheap, filling, and incredibly versatile. Potato pancakes were made by grating raw potatoes, mixing them with flour, eggs, and seasoning, then frying them until crispy. They could be served with applesauce, sour cream, or simply eaten plain. These pancakes were especially popular in immigrant households, where similar recipes had been passed down from European ancestors. In some homes, they were made entirely without eggs if they were too expensive, relying on just flour and water to bind the potatoes together. Some thrifty cooks even added leftover mashed potatoes from the previous night's dinner to stretch the batter further, ensuring that nothing went to waste. They were often fried in lard or bacon drippings, which added rich flavor without the need for expensive oils. Families loved them because they could be served at breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and they were hearty enough to satisfy even the hungriest bellies. In a time when every penny mattered, potato pancakes were the kind of comfort food that brought a little normalcy to the table. Boiled carrot sandwich. This unusual creation came about when meat became a rare luxury. Carrots were boiled until soft, then mashed with butter, mayonnaise, or even a little sugar, and spread between slices of bread. It wasn't glamorous, but it was nutritious and affordable. Kids might not have loved it, but parents appreciated any recipe that could fill their children's stomachs without draining their food budget. For some, the boiled carrot sandwich was a daily lunch, a reminder of how far people would go to make something from very little. Some thrifty homemakers seasoned the mash with a pinch of salt and pepper, or even a splash of vinegar to give it more depth. If they had access to garden-fresh carrots, the flavor was sweeter and brighter, making the sandwich a bit more appealing. For those living in farming communities, carrots were easy to grow, store, and preserve, so they became a dependable base for meals. The carrot sandwich might never win a gourmet award, but during the Depression, it was a quiet hero on countless lunch plates. Egg drop soup. Egg drop soup was quick, simple, and nourishing. Water or broth was brought to a boil, and beaten eggs were drizzled in slowly, cooking instantly into delicate ribbons. A bit of seasoning, leftover vegetables, or even scraps of meat could be added for flavor. This dish was a perfect example of how one or two eggs could be transformed into a meal for an entire family. It was warm, comforting, and easy to make even when supplies were low. Some households would stretch it even further by serving it over rice or noodles, turning a thin soup into a more filling main dish. Garlic, green onions, or a dash of pepper could elevate the flavor, but even plain, it offered a satisfying warmth. For many families, it became a go-to on cold nights or when illness struck, since it was both gentle on the stomach and easy to prepare. Cabbage and noodles, also known as haluski in some Eastern European immigrant households. Cabbage and noodles combined boiled egg noodles with sautéed cabbage and onions. Cooked in butter or bacon fat, it was simple but surprisingly flavorful. Cabbage was inexpensive, stored well, and could bulk up any meal, making it a Depression-era favorite. This dish was often served as a main course, but it could also be stretched further by serving it alongside bread or soup. Many families who had access to home gardens grew their own cabbage, making this dish nearly cost-free. In colder months, when fresh vegetables were scarce, a head of cabbage could be stored in a root cellar for weeks, ready to be turned into a satisfying meal at a moment's notice. Some cooks would sprinkle a little black pepper or paprika over the top for extra flavor, while others relied on the smoky richness of bacon fat to make it irresistible. Macaroni and cheese loaf sandwich. Transport yourself back to mid-20th century America, where a comfort food took on a new form. The classic sandwich. Think of slices of macaroni and cheese loaf, a delightful combination of pasta and ham shaped into a loaf-like product. Layered between bread with mustard or mayonnaise, this intriguing dish made its debut in the 1950s, becoming a unique addition to the American sandwich repertoire. Imagine families gathering around tables, savoring this peculiar yet beloved creation. Chips or pickles often accompanied this culinary delight, adding an extra layer of flavor. Velveeta fudge. Velveeta fudge is not a myth, but a very real dessert that graced tables across America. The star ingredient is that familiar processed cheese brick found in countless refrigerators. The logic behind this unusual combination? Velveeta is soft, salty, and melts perfectly. When combined with cocoa powder, butter, and powdered sugar, it creates a rich, creamy texture remarkably similar to traditional fudge. Skeptics became believers after tasting it. Once melted and mixed, the cheese's flavor disappears completely, leaving behind deeply chocolatey, ultra-smooth fudge with a subtle salty edge. During times when fresh dairy was expensive or difficult to store, Velveeta offered a practical alternative that didn't require refrigeration until after preparation. This recipe became a cherished family secret, passed down through generations with the caveat, "Just try it before you judge it." The unexpected marriage of processed cheese and chocolate demonstrates the creative problem-solving that characterized mid-century American cooking, finding new uses for everyday ingredients to create something surprisingly delicious. Sardine sandwich. The sandwich that cleared a 3-foot radius around you. Tinned sardines mashed with mayonnaise on white bread, sometimes with a squeeze of lemon if your parents were fancy. The smell announced your lunch before you did. Kids would dramatically hold their noses, but secretly, some were jealous of your sophisticated palate. The oily fish would soak into the bread, making the whole thing a soft, savory experience that you either loved or hated. There was an unspoken hierarchy to sardine sandwiches. The basic version had just the fish and mayo. The intermediate version included finely diced onions or celery for texture, and the elite version featured capers or chopped pickles that added briny pops of flavor. The sardine sandwich revealed your family's economic philosophy. Some saw it as a protein-packed, affordable option, while others viewed it as a delicacy worth the premium price of imported fish. The best versions had the sardines mashed just enough to create a spread while leaving some recognizable pieces for textural interest. By mid-morning, the sandwich would have fully matured, with the flavors melting together and the oils penetrating the bread to create a unified culinary experience. Cheese and jelly sandwich. The poor man's cheesecake. Cream cheese spread thick on white bread with a layer of grape jelly. The sweet and tangy combination was a revelation before fancy flavor combinations were cool. It was like having dessert for lunch, and sometimes the cream cheese would melt just enough to mix with the jelly, creating marble swirls that looked as good as they tasted. The bread would get a little soggy, but that was part of the charm. Opening your lunchbox to find this sandwich meant your parent had taken extra time that morning, as spreading cold cream cheese on soft bread required patience and finesse. If spread too roughly, the bread would tear, resulting in a patchwork sandwich that tasted the same but lost aesthetic points. Different jelly flavors created different experiences. Grape was classic and assertive. Strawberry added a hint of sophistication, and the rare exotic flavors like apricot or blackberry meant your family had recently visited a farmer's market or fancy hat. The sandwich's appearance would transform throughout the morning. By lunchtime, the jelly would partially absorb into both the cream cheese and bread, creating a graduated color effect that was visually striking. In winter months, the cold classroom would keep the cream cheese firm, while in warmer seasons, it would develop a soft, almost frosting-like consistency. Egg drop soup. Egg drop soup appears in countless vintage cookbooks as a kindless comfort dish once prepared in nearly every American kitchen. This recipe, originally tucked between yellowed pages of grandmother's handwritten collections, represents culinary wisdom nearly lost to time. In those dog-eared cookbooks from generations past, instructions detailed how to transform humble ingredients into something remarkable by whisking eggs into a simmering broth, creating silky ribbons that dance through the golden liquid. The instructions were charmingly imprecise. A pot of broth heated until steam rises, with eggs added in a thin stream, while stirring gently to achieve the characteristic delicate texture. The result was a soup that combined the rustic simplicity of farm-fresh eggs with carefully crafted broths that simmered for hours. Often, handwritten notes and margins suggested additions. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell for more nostalgic recipes and frugal living tips. And let me know in the comments, which of these meals have you tried, and which ones are you excited to bring back to your kitchen? Until next time, keep cooking with love and a little old-fashioned ingenuity.